thank you to Alex Bell. Thank you very much for the news at 6 o'clock. And he mentioned the weather at the end there. Weather's been causing problems for Manx sport in general for the past couple of months, past couple of years, people would say. Welcome to Friday Football Focus with myself, Chris Cave, and Manx Radio's football correspondent, Tony Mepham, where this evening the debate lies firmly around fixtures, because we should be nearing the end of the season. We should be crowning champions and seeing the fate of sides who have been relegated, but we're actually midway through the season due to the fixture backlog. Tony Mepham, how many fixtures are we behind?
I reckon at the moment we're roughly within one or two games, 180 fixtures behind, and with what possibly comes tomorrow. Just to give you a rough idea, we're due to complete the league season tomorrow. So tomorrow should be the last scheduled league game, and then we've always got one or two sort of rearranged fixtures to slot in, we know that. But at the moment we've got 40 Premier League games outstanding. Division 2 we've got 44, Combination 1 we've got 40, Combination 2 37. The Railway Cup we're 3 games behind because we've got 2 semi-finals and a final. The Women's Grass is about 5 behind. The FA Cup we're roughly 3 games behind. The Woods Cup 5 games behind, and the Masters 3 behind. And that's not taking into consideration the games tomorrow because they're down as scheduled fixtures. They're not rearranged fixtures. So, you know, we're in a bit of a mess now with the weather that keeps coming at us, and we're losing games every weekend.
It provides a serious headache for yourself doing the fixtures, and obviously for players, clubs, managers, referees who want to organise things for when the season finishes. Or it's just a bit of a mess. But is it all down to the weather?
No, we've added 2 or 3 things, I think, this year. The first one is the success for the Island under-18s because they were home games, and it meant that clubs could cancel games, which was fine if they've got first-team players playing. And we don't like to play games when the under-18s and the seniors play. Unfortunately, with the under-18s, it wasn't getting supported like we thought it would be. We gave them the opportunity to go and watch the younger players play, the future Island players, and they weren't going. So we said, right, okay, we'll scrap that idea. As well with the first team, you know, we got it on a later kick-off, the senior men, and we lost quite a few games there. But the weather has been the biggest problem. And once you start coming into cup games as well, and you get cup games cancelled, and then the following week you try to reschedule them, you just don't get through it. This is the latest that I've ever known in all the times I've been involved in Manx football, that the Railway Cup will be played. I know we did have one final, I can't remember which it was now, was played late on. I think it was October, I can't remember which one it was, and that was due to the bowl being refurbed, and we just held it back. But yeah, it's becoming a really big problem, and I'm finding now that the clubs aren't helping themselves, and that's quite sad to see that happen.
Well, let's discuss that before we get into the meat of the matter. If you have a suggestion or a comment you'd like to make regarding this issue, then do get in touch. You can text 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. Elaborate on that then, Tony. What do you mean when you say that the clubs aren't helping?
Well, we did a review. It's similar to now, and getting loads of phone calls from clubs and individuals, you know, what's happening and where we're going with this. And I thought, right, we need to try and get a statement out because we're not normally this far behind. But, you know, with Joe Pack, we did a feature on the weather and postponements and stuff like that. And people were saying about going to summer football. We need another Chris Bass, another 3G pitches. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Then we wouldn't have any sort of backlog of fixtures. And I think over the last sort of 2 months, I've realised I don't know if we need another 3G pitch, because at the moment the bowl is sitting there at 5 o'clock, and Andy Howland has been an absolute saint down there, has managed to get the slot staff for us, and clubs are looking at games, calling them off, and then when you say, well, the bowl's there, and they don't want it. They want to use it if it's free, but unfortunately it's a facility owned by government, and it's got to be paid for. So if the club split the cost and go down that way, then they can get a game of football done. But, we've had some games midweek and everything else, but the FA have stood the cost on that because they had it booked for senior men training. But now they don't have that now. So anyone who's going to play on the ball now will have to pay. And clubs are picking and choosing when they want to play. It's like tomorrow. The Isle of Man FA have had to really force Braddon to go and play at the Bowl because we need to get this FA Cup final on. And it's not nice, but what a gesture by St George's, because the cost has to be picked up by Braddon, and it's roughly about £160. As far as I know, St George's are prepared to pay half. They just want to play football.
Well, massive credit to St George's for that gesture. Could it be a case, though, Tony, that players pay their subs and the clubs don't want to be out of pocket spending money on another pitch? Surely is there no other solution to this problem? Because I've always thought, and this could be a very simplistic idea, but pitch covers, is that? I mean, I know they would cost a bit of money. Would they work? But surely if this is happening on a regular basis, that covering the pitches makes ideal sense.
Well, it does sound good sense, and we've had this conversation at work. Chap I work with, Mike Chattel, he does downhill mountain biking, and we were just talking about it one day, and he said, well, why don't you put covers on it and stuff like that? I don't know how much a cover would cost. It's a fair few quid. But then you've got to find, 12 people to try and stretch it out. Then, the water's going to run off and it's going to be around the edges. Then when you've used it, you've got to fold it all up. I don't know how practical it is, and I've never really seen it. I've seen it down at Cronkbourne Cricket Club, and I like the idea, but I don't know how it would work. But, I'm looking at sort of the bowl costs. If you've got £80 per club, to play on it, if you said to the players, OK, it's added expense, it's expensive to look after a football club. If all the players chipped in, £5, so there's like, say, 13, 14 players, you're nearly there. But the clubs that I'm sort of having problems with, I know have got the money. And it's like, prime example, tomorrow, I know there's a game here that could be cancelled. And I said to him, listen, the bowl's there at 5 o'clock. Tomorrow, how do you fancy playing on the bowl? And the players want to play, but someone else has said, no, I don't want to play because he's 2 or 3 players short maybe, and he'd rather have his full team. And I don't get it. The players want to play, but someone else has got the power to say, no, we're not. I don't get it.
Well, this is a problem that is affecting all 4 divisions of Manx football. But just to highlight, in the Canada Life Premier League, Laxey in 8th place have played 11 matches this season, but St Mary's, being at the Bowl, they've played 21, and that difference is vast. You can't get a picture of what the table is going to look like in any sense, really, because, again, at the bottom of the table, Colby played 19 matches. Braddon and Ramsey, who occupy the relegation places at the moment, played 6 games fewer. So it's difficult for everybody involved, but this disparity can't be good for Manx football.
Well, it isn't good, and I know Paul Callow must be so frustrated. He's the manager of Laxey, and a little bit of Laxey's problem is their own doing, because they've got class, real quality under-18s. Because of the run of fixtures that the under-18s had Ireland team, is Paul's not going to play without 2 of his best players within the rules, and they postponed the game, that's fine. But unfortunately, those 3 or 4 games he's lost has now come back to haunt him. And when you think of those players as well, they've only played 11. So tomorrow should be their 24th game. So they're 13 games behind after tomorrow, potentially. 13 weeks, that's 3 months, just over 3 months they're behind in football. That can't be good for Paul, can't be good for the players who have missed out on football. And suddenly now we're going into the Hospital Cup, Junior Cup, Cal Cup, and all probably the same group of players are going to have to play in all them games, and injuries, commitments and everything else. That's massive pressure. Massive pressure.
What is being done by the Isle of Man FA to really tackle this problem? Because I think people looking from the outside in will say, well, surely the Isle of Man can't be the only jurisdiction where weather affects sport. There must be many, many places across the world, nearby jurisdictions that we can have conversations with and say, well, how do you tackle this problem? How do you solve this? And put in preventative measures that mean more football matches get played and fewer get called off.
Yeah, it's all over. UK, we're in constant touch with the English FA. Frank Stennett, the Isle of Man CEO, is in contact with other CEOs, and it all comes back. And I can't remember which county it was, and I mentioned it last week. One of the league counties has got a guy similar to me who do the fixtures. The Isle of Man's 24 clubs, so yeah, we can get on with that. But he's dealing with mega amounts of clubs, and it just got to the end of his tether really, and he's packed it in, and now that county are having to pay someone to do the fixtures because our volunteers looking at it and going, oh, chance, that's going to take over my life. To me, it's a little challenge. It doesn't sort of bother me, but what does bother me, as I've found out the last 2 or 3 weeks, is, clubs are being reluctant. I'll give you an instance, and I won't mention the club. 2 weeks ago, I knew the bowl was available. A club was way behind with their fixtures. So I tried to make contact with their secretary. There was no answer. Tried again, no answer. Tried the third time, no answer. So I phoned someone in the club and just said to him, I'm just wondering if maybe you want to play at the bowl next Wednesday. There's a chance the bowl's there. And he said, yeah, I'll WhatsApp, and I don't do all that. I'll WhatsApp the players and I'll come back to you. An hour later, he came back. He says, yeah, players are up for that. Fantastic, no problem. But we just need to get it confirmed by the committee. Yeah, that's fine, no problem. Give us a ring back. And then suddenly the person rings me back and said, you haven't really followed protocol. You haven't been in touch with the committee. I said, well, I tried to get in touch with the lead of the committee, but I couldn't. He wasn't answering his phone. His phone was off. I didn't know what was wrong. So I've gone to, like a lieutenant, I've gone to a second in command. You've come back and said yes, but now suddenly the person in command has come into the picture, and because I hadn't phoned him, he says, unless Tony phones me and discusses it with me, it's not happening. So I took the attitude, I'll tell you what, I've spent 7 hours on this on a Sunday to try and get this game sorted. I thought, it's not happening. So I went to another club, and within 20 minutes, we had someone else on that fixture. This is wrong. It's totally wrong. And it's not the Isle of Man Football Association's fault. It's the clubs.
Well, the Isle of Man Football Association has been the target of criticism, really, from one texter in who says, why doesn't the FA help subsidise the bowl? If it wants all games on, the Isle of Man has plenty of money.
Trust me, the Isle of Man FA doesn't have plenty of money, but who owns the money that the Isle of Man FA have? The 24 member clubs own it. And that money is spent on a decision by the clubs. There's no hierarchy in the FA who decide how to spend it. There will guidance. And those people are put in place by the clubs. And I know for sure now that if that proposal went forward, that the Isle of Man FA subsidised to hire the bowl, I know the clubs, I'm pretty certain, would say no. It wouldn't happen. And I think it was a great suggestion by someone, is why don't you put up the joining fee each season to the clubs, say by £100, and then use that money to hire the bowl, but every club has to have a fair crack at using the bowl. And I thought it was a great idea, and maybe it's something that we can look at in future. But the Isle of Man FA certainly aren't awash with money. The balance sheet's coming out shortly, and the clubs will know exactly what's in there, and it's not a wash.
Says Tony Mepham from the Isle of Man FA, who arrived at Manx Radio in a Rolls Royce this evening. No, he didn't. That seems very, very disappointing that clubs don't seem to have the same enthusiasm to get the games on that you and your colleagues at the FA do. Surely then there could be some new rules and regulations or new policy regarding this matter that needs to be conjured up and sent out to the 24 clubs and say, listen, we have to do everything we can to get these games on, but we need to work together, because if we're all working in different directions, then this problem just isn't going to go away.
Yeah, I would hope that we weren't talking about this, because I fully understand, because I'm involved with the club, how much it costs to do a pitch, to maintain it, to run a football club. It's a colossal amount of money, and that's why the players pay subs. But also you've got to remember that sponsorship comes in and helps fund it as well. And I accept that the bowl is not expensive, but it has to be paid for. But when you split it between two clubs, the cost isn't great. And some clubs, I know, are only too happy to play there if they've got a problem. But other clubs look at it, and if it doesn't suit them, because they've got some players missing and they don't really want the game to be played, they'll say, nah, we can't do it. And that's where, I know our club, Corinthians, we've tried to do it twice at the Bowl this year. And one time, we just paid the money to get on with it because we want our players to have football. But it certainly needs to look at, I would rather that we didn't have to do that because the weather would play ball and we would get the games played. But I've realised over the last 4 weeks, definitely, it's all right, the club's harping on, let's get at the Bowl, let's play, yes, we'll come. And then when the opportunity comes and I phone them up and say, listen, the Bowl's there, do you want it? Oh, I don't know. One club, I asked them to play at the Bowl this weekend. I sent an email Sunday night and I'm still waiting for a reply.
Well, if you have a reply this evening, then do get in touch. We've got about 7 minutes remaining of the programme, but 166 177 via text, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. Tony, I guess the £1 million question right now, if I had to ask you, and this could be months and months down the line, but when do you envisage this current football season ending? Because surely if you've got such a backlog of fixtures, then there's not really going to be an off-season. One season will finish and they'll have to go straight into the next season if they want to continue.
The big problem's going to be that we have to be finished really the week before TT. I think the first practice session is the 26th, Saturday the 26th, I think, of May. There must be, we were trying to calculate up the other day, there must be half of the member clubs, so 12, that have camping on their pitches. So they need to prepare that. There will be no pressure from the FA, I wouldn't think. Certainly not from me. If they've got camping the week before, there will be no fixtures, sort of put on them. That's got to be played because it's so important, camping now, for sports clubs all round, to give them that bit of spare cash to develop the facility, but also to pay the bills at the end of the season because, some of our pitches out, or most of our pitches out there, playing surfaces are fantastic, but that comes at a cost. Equipment. I was up looking at Uni Mills last night. The equipment and everything that they've got there, that doesn't come at £1,000 or £2,000. That's multi-thousands, and we've got a lot of clubs in that position. So, my view is that I think players, hopefully, some players will help and come in and fork pitches and put a bit of time in that way. But also when there's fundraising events, this sort of situation, they need to take on board and think, well, maybe if we had a quadruplay, which is about £4,000, if we had that, we'd maybe get football on. So we need to get that money in so we can buy that machine.
But this situation, it seems, as it so often is down to money. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
Would it get to a stage, and is it likely to get to a stage, where the games that have been postponed, you'll have to look at and say, well, that would have been a dead rubber anyway, effectively. It won't go ahead. And some games will literally just be lost.
I hope not. We've never had that situation before. The new rule that was brought in this year, and that was pressure from the English FA, where if a game wasn't played because a club couldn't field a team for whatever reason, they used to have 3 points deducted and then the game was rearranged. The English FA rules allowed that we could award the points to the opposing team, so that's what we've done this year, which helps. And I know when the games come through thick and fast, clubs will opt out of games, and that's fine. But last year the clubs brought in themselves a fine system to the clubs. So now, say for talking's sake, if Corinthians couldn't field a team tomorrow and it was their first offence, they'd be fined £25. The following week, if they couldn't fulfil the fixture for the second time, it's £50, and it keeps going and keeps going. And I know one club this year had 3 games postponed, so that third game that they postponed cost them £75, and then they had another one, so that was their fourth, so that was £100. So in 2 weeks they were fined £175 by the FA, but that rule was brought in by the clubs, not by the FA, because the clubs are tired of some clubs just opting out playing fixtures, and hopefully that fine will make them play and try a bit harder and getting the team out there to play.
There was a danger that Friday Football Focus could turn into half an hour of a moaning Mepham saying all clubs aren't doing enough.
Helpful.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to hear that there are plans in the pipeline to try and get these fixtures played. One of those is to start with some midweek evening fixtures.
Yep.
Something I do there is something magical. I've said before, I enjoy if I have to play hockey in midweek. It is kind of a magical feel to it.
Yeah.
But I do understand players have work and family commitments. They've got lives outside of amateur football, remember. So it is difficult getting clubs to field a team midweek.
100%, and cricket comes in as well, and we don't want to impose into their season. But I think the two biggest supported competitions are Cal Cup, because parents, grandparents and that go and watch their sons, grandsons, whatever, play midweek, and also the Hospital Cup on a Sunday night I thought was good, but some people said no, it didn't, so we've altered it this year. So the Hospital Cup is 2 o'clock kick-off on a Saturday, and the Junior Cup is going to go to the Sunday 2 o'clock kick-off, which means we'll alter the night games as well. So where first teams used to be Wednesday, now they'll be Tuesday, and combinations used to be a Tuesday, that'll go on a Wednesday. So we're trying things, but when we've got things in place, we need clubs to buy into it, find out pros and cons. If it doesn't work, then try again with something else. But at the moment, we're just hitting a wall now and then, and people are getting frustrated, and it's not our fault. We put the fixtures on. All we want is the clubs to play them.
Well, one listener believes one solution is to get the clubs to try and agree to an earlier start, maybe in August, claiming that another 4 guaranteed games we haven't had this season on good, dry pitches, 2 Saturdays and 2 midweeks. And that is a fair point, surely. When the weather is good, get as much football played as possible, because we know come this time of year we do get rain hammering down, ruining the pitches, and then there are a lot of postponements.
Absolutely. But why was the fixtures delayed till 3rd of September, I think it was? Because the clubs put a club put a proposal forward to delay the start of the season by, I think it was 2.5 weeks. And the clubs voted for it. I tell you what, because hopefully this year it'll go back to the start date, which is usually the second week in August. I think the clubs would vote to go back to the second week in August now, because we've tried it. It hasn't worked. We look again.
And I suppose that there's a danger. You don't want to upset the clubs, and if they all agree, that's fine. You have to listen to them. But is there no chance you can overrule it and say, no, we know the problems that the weather causes. Let's start early. Let's start in August and get these games played. When a club says, oh, we'd like to push the date back, surely you can come back and say, no, for the good of Manx football, we need to start the season earlier.
One thing I like about Manx football is a lot of counties, the control is down to a committee of maybe 6 or 8 people or a board or whatever. The Isle of Man, total control is by council, and council is made up by a member of each club. Then the council decide. They have to have people there to do individual jobs. Then the council decide who the president and vice presidents are, and then the vice presidents and the president choose the subcommittees, and then they work from there. But basically the control of Manx football is by the clubs, and my personal view is it has to stay that way.
Well, Tony Mepham, thank you very much for this debate this evening, and thank you to you, the listeners, who have contributed so kindly, as you always do. Paul Corkish is standing by. I know you're singing the jingle in your head. Triple gold, Paul Corkish is next. Tony Mepham, thanks very much for being here. I take it you will be at Russian versus Corinthians tomorrow.
Not actually, because I did Corinthians last week, and I'm going to Corinthians next week in the semi, because it's a long time since I've seen them in a semi. So tomorrow, my plan is to go and watch Braddon against St George's.
Well, Tony Mepham, once again, thank you very much, and thank you very much at home for listening. Saturday Live and Saturday Sport Classified with Ed Oldham tomorrow, where you can get all the results from the weekend's fixtures in football, rugby and indeed hockey. But that from me is all this evening. Make sure you have a very good weekend.